The Paul Leslie Interviews.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to welcome our special guest, the band leader of Cleto and the Cletones, the house band on the ABC late-night television show, Jimmy Kimmel Live. Welcome to Cleto Escobedo III. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It's great to talk to you.
Great. Yeah, good to talk to you.
I think most stories are best from the beginning. What was life like growing up?
It was. I had a really fun childhood. You know, I was born in Las Vegas, and when I was born, my dad was already a traveling musician. So, and I kind of grew up in the back of a '65 Chevy, driving around the country playing gigs with my dad. Well, not playing, but just traveling with my parents. You know, before school. So we had fun when my dad was on the road. And he I don't know. Once he quit pretty early into my childhood. I was like 7. And so I just grew up in Vegas, and I had a pretty normal childhood, as normal as childhood you can have it in Las Vegas. It was a small town back then.
You just mentioned your father. Your father is a musician like yourself. What kind of influence has your father had on you?
Well, he's had a lot of influence on me. I mean, you know, both as a musician and mainly as a man and a human being. And musically, there was always music playing in the house, and of course I was influenced by a lot of the stuff that he listened to and stuff like that. I'd go and see his bands, you know, when I was really little. As a person, you just try to do the right thing, treat everybody nice, and try to work on your craft as much as you can.
Well, tell us a little bit about your father's band. I think that's interesting.
He had a band. They originally were from San Antonio, Texas, originally called the Dell Kings. Dell, D-E-L-L Kings. Their dream was to come out to California or Vegas or whatever. Back then, you know, in the late 50s, early 60s, Vegas was really happening. It was a Rat Pack time and everything. So, you know, long story short, they finally got to Las Vegas, and they changed the name to Los Blues. And they played around town, but they landed like a house gig at the Sahara. They had a couple of shows there. And they would alternate with, you know, whoever was the headline, from Duke Ellington to Louis Prima to whoever else was kind of big there. But everybody would go see them because they would start at like the first show was 2 or 3:30 in the morning, and then they'd go from there. Or they'd have 2 shows, so all the entertainers would go see them. So they were a pretty popular band there in town, and everybody from Sammy Davis to Johnny Carson back then to even Elvis went a few times, and so it's kind of a happening scene back then. But they had a really, really good band. Once they lost their gig at the Sahara, they recorded an album and then kind of did some more stuff, and they just went on the road, and nothing really, really came of the record. They were a pretty popular band and pretty legendary there in Las Vegas.
In terms of your own musical loves, what were some of your favorites when you were growing up?
My favorite, I mean, I really loved like R&B and funk stuff, you know. So growing up, very early, more soul music, but I liked Earth, Wind & Fire, Stevie Wonder, Sly and the Family Stone, all that kind of stuff. More of the funk stuff, but I like everything. But that was what really influenced me more. And then early as a singer, like I loved Jackie Wilson and all the 70s soul people, Marvin, all that kind of stuff. And of course, jazz and all that stuff.
You're a saxophone player, so tell us about some of the influences you have.
You know, I loved all the greats, you know, Bird, Cannonball, Coltrane, and all the older guys. But I don't really consider myself, you know, a jazz musician. I love jazz and everything, but I love Michael Brecker too. That's like probably my favorite all time. But the person I think who influenced me the most on the saxophone was a guy named Grover Washington Jr. Me being more of an R&B sax player, you know, I really gravitated toward him because he was really soulful and funky, and I just really loved the way he played. And when I was a kid, I emulated him a lot, and I really liked him. He was probably my biggest influence, other than, you know, obviously my father when I was really little.
Our special guest is Cleto Escobedo III. He's the band leader of Cleto and the Cletones. I wanted to ask you about Jimmy Kimmel. How did you first meet him, and what was your impression of Jimmy?
Jimmy and I first met, I was 10 years old and he was 9 years old, and we happened to move on the same block in Las Vegas. It was a new housing, you know, development, and I think I was riding my bike. It was kind of an overcast day, and I see this kind of skinny kid with sunglasses and boxing gloves just walking down the street. I kind of thought it was odd on a rainy day. This guy had shades on and just like with boxing gloves. I didn't really But I met him, and I thought he was kind of odd, but soon thereafter we became really close friends, and then we've been friends ever since.
You work with him, so what does he like to work with?
It's funny, we don't have a lot of like day-to-day really like interaction where we're like just working shoulder to shoulder or anything, because I kind of just run my department, and I try to be as professional as I can, let him do his job, and I'm not up in his office telling jokes and bullshitting with him. He's got a job to do, so he's great to work with. He takes his job very seriously, and he works very hard. It makes it that much easier for all of us to want to work hard when the main person really, really puts his nose to the ground and works,
You're also a vocalist. I want to tell all the listeners out there, if you go on YouTube, there's this really nice performance of the song, In Other Words, which a lot of people call Fly Me to the Moon.
Oh, yeah.
You really did it nicely. So what
Thank you.
What singers do you admire?
I love all the old R&B guys, not old, but I mean, like I said, Jackie Wilson in the beginning, Donny Hathaway, of course, Michael McDonald, Stevie Wonder. Those are all my like big heroes that I love. But I mean, I also too love the crooners. I love Frank Sinatra. I love all those guys too. But yeah, all the soul guys really got me when I was a kid. That's what I would sit in the mirror and try to learn all their licks and everything as a kid.
Do you compose music?
I've written some songs, mostly melody and lyrics and stuff, but I don't consider myself a big composer. But I did write the theme. I co-wrote the theme, so I did that. So that's I'm proud of that. But I don't like sit down and compose stuff much, But I've written some stuff. I had a record out in '94 and Virgin. I co-wrote some stuff in that, and still with a couple of bands I've written some stuff too. But I don't think I'm a big composer,
Well, who did you write the theme with?
I wrote it with a guy named Les Pierce, he's actually produced stuff for Earth and Fire and different things. He produced some stuff on my record, and he always said, I told him if I ever had an opportunity for us to actually write something of weight, I'd always include him. I did. Also, Jimmy Kimmel's little brother, Jonathan Kimmel, wrote the lyrics, which consist of It's Jimmy Kimmel Live, so he's a part writer, too. So.
It's kind of interesting because on The Late Show with David Letterman, that famous theme song was written by their band leader, Paul Shaffer.
Oh, yeah.
I'm very curious to know, do you know Paul or have you met him?
I've been fortunate to, get to know him, to meet him and get to know him and kind of hang out with him a little bit a few times. And he's great. Jimmy and I grew up big David Letterman fans when we were kids. So obviously I was a fan of everybody on the show. And Paul, me being a musician, I really admired him and was a big fan of his too before, so to have this gig and to be able to talk to him about it, it's really, really fun. And he was very forthcoming and a lot of great advice and a lot of, shared stories about, our position, because there's not a lot of us in the country. So.
What is he like just in terms of his personality?
He's great. He's kind of he's what you think he would be, but he's not as animated, obviously. But he's great. He's just down to earth and funny and witty and very, very knowledgeable about music and a lot of things.
Our special guest is Cleto Escobedo III. You've performed with Paula Abdul.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
Well, at the time it was really fun. She was like doing very, very well, and it was a pretty big tour. Back then it was like her, Paula, and Donna. The big three pop stars. So when I got that gig, I was very, very excited because it was my first major tour that I was. I'd been playing in Las Vegas for a few years. So when I got that, it was very exciting to go out and see the world and play arenas, and had a few step outs on that tour, so it was fun to play solos in front of 20,000 people, which I had never done before. It was quite the rush. But it was really fun. It also led me to my first and only, as it were, record deal, because she helped me get signed to Virgin. So that was kind of a cool gig for me in a few ways.
There's no doubt that some of the biggest names come through Jimmy Kimmel Live. Who has been the nicest person that you've met?
You mean just big, like, movie star or whatever, or anybody?
Yeah, the person that you've met that it was unbelievable how friendly or how kind they were.
Who, for me personally, I get to, music people come up first, but Dave Grohl was like the coolest dude that I've met, yeah. There's been a lot of big names that are very nice, but just he was one of the first ones we met, and we were kind of an upstart show, and it was very, very cool to all of us in the band, and he's arguably one of the biggest rock stars in the world, and was very down to earth, and it was very cool to meet him when he one of my heroes, and he was just like one of us.
What about musicians that you've been the most excited to meet that have come through?
Well, I mean, I can't not mention I got to meet Paul McCartney, which was pretty incredible, and I met him like by chance. I happened to be in the green room, and we just walked by, and he just said hi. It was very nice, and I was just kind of like, wow, Paul McCartney. But I've been able to meet Sting, and like one of my all-time favorites too, Michael McDonald, and he sat in with our band just to be able to talk to him and actually sing with him and hear his voice coming through my ear monitors was very exciting, just because I've been such a fan of his all my life since my childhood. And yeah, then again, I cannot mention Dave again, because Dave Grohl is just, I mean, he's one of my all-time heroes, so it's great to talk to him.
What is the best thing about being Cleto Escobedo III?
Well, I have a great family and I have great friends. I'm very fortunate enough to get to spend a lot of time with my family, and I get to spend time with my friends and play with all my best friends, because all my friends are in the band as well, and my father, and one of my oldest best friends is my boss. So everything's pretty cool. I mean, I can't complain. I got a great gig and still having a really good time doing it.
What would you like to say to anyone who listens to this interview?
I don't know. Maybe to young musicians to just keep at it. You never know where you're going to land in this business. I toured around with a lot of people, and of course I wanted to be a recording artist. I had shots at that. Some stuff didn't work out. I had some really fun gigs, some really not so fun gigs, but you never know where you're going to land, and it just kind of came out of the blue, and it's been a great thing for my career. And I guess what I'm trying to say is just like never stop reaching for your dream, because you just never know where you can end up. It might not be your exact dream, but it might end up being pretty cool.
My last question: who is Cleto Escobedo III?
Just a lucky, simple guy who likes to enjoy life and have fun and love his friends and family.
Thank you very much for this interview.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Take care, and we'll talk soon.